Greetings, Fire Chargers, Darkblade here, and in this video we are going to look at the question, who was King Ahasuerus? I'm of course talking about the Book of Esther. As you can see, I have two reference Bibles open for reference. Other figures named Ahasuerus from other books will not be examined in this video. So I have a list of the Achaemanid monarchs, basic genealogy, and some reference verses. Now let us read the first reference verse. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces, in the days when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne in Susa the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants, the army of Persia and Media, and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him. So that is one reference verse, and I want to couple it with two more really big reference verses. That's chapter 3, verse 7. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, and so it's counting using the Hebrew calendar, not months according to the king's ascension date. In the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pour, that is, they cast lots, before Hanan every day, and they cast it every month after month, till the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. I think the NIV might phrase it in more clearly. Now, the NIV does explicitly decide on one, and I know people have identified it as Xerxes based on linguistic arguments based on the name. However, this is my video, and in my video I will make my argument. And by the way, I am currently one-handing the Samsung Galaxy that I'm using to record this video. In the 12th year, King Ahasuerus, yes, I know it identifies one, but I'm not going to do that right now. In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, they cast the pour, that is the lot, in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month, and that lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. That is, Haman has this plan to kill all the Jews in the empire, in the Achaemanid Empire, and they're deciding when should we do it. And let's skip ahead to chapter 9, verse 1, which actually covers the events of that 12th month. On the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. So we now at the 12th month, the month of Adar. We still have the same monarch, I think. And we know we have this same monarch because look from the narrative later in chapter 9. And it's hard to look through both my camera and through this, and I am both simultaneously looking directly at my reference Bible and looking at my reference Bible through the camera, and I'm still one-handing this. Okay. So, and the king said to Queen Esther in Susa the citadel, so we still have the same king. So that lets us know that King Ahasuerus had to have reigned 12 years. That allows us to disqualify Artaxerxes V, who only reigned for 1 year. Get some out on my mechanical pencil. So let's X out Artaxerxes V, who reigned for 1 year, Darius III, who reigned for 6, And I'm now looking Artaxerxes IV, who reigned for 2, and Saldianus, who reigned for about 1, Xerxes II, who reigned for less than 1, Bardia might be the real Bardia, might be an imposter, but either way, he's eliminated because he reigned for less than 1 in a year, so not long enough. Cambyses II reigned for only 8 years. Now, Cyrus II. Now, Now, it's kind of difficult which date you want to take. Like for the starting of Cyrus II, when should we start this? Should we start this in 559 BC, where he became the king of Persia? Or should we take this with the Median Empire's collapse, the Persian revolt, and the actual founding of the Achaemanid Empire in 550 BC? Or should we start it from 538 BC, the conquest of Babylon? Now, I said remember verse 3 of chapter 1, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants, the army of Persia and Media, and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him. Now, if we want to go with 559 BC, if you start the count in 559 BC, then we don't get Cyrus did not rule Media by his 3rd year. He actually ruled it, I think, starting around his 9th or 10th. So we can cross that out. And if we start the count in 538 BC, he doesn't even get to, at 12 years. So that leaves either 550 BC, or we have to disqualify Cyrus II as well. Now, it says that he reigned over 127 provinces. It reigns from India to Ethiopia. The actual says. Let me see what my NIV says. Just reminding you that I'm one-handing this. I'm going... I went too far. Okay. From India to Kush. Now Kush is in Africa, and Cyrus II never reigned over African territory. Or Egypt was conquered by Cambyses II in his 5th regnal year. In his 5th or 6th regnal year. And I think there's something else that works. So let me just pull up another one of my reference verses in chapter 2, verses 16 through 17. And when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head. Now, Esther was a Jew, and the Achaemanid Empire did not have a Jewish population, and I think until after the conquest of Babylon. So there wouldn't have been a Jew for him to marry in 543 BC. So we can just eliminate Cyrus II altogether. Now, who does that leave us with? It leaves us with a lot less candidates. We have Darius I, Xerxes I, Artaxerxes I, Darius II, Artaxerxes II, and Artaxerxes III. This is where this reference verse comes in. Chapter 2, verses 5 through 8. Now there was a Jew in the citadel, in Susa, the citadel. A Jew in the capital. well, at this point in time. And by the way, this is a year prior to her actually entering the harem of Xerxes, so this would have been around the 6th regnal year. Whose name was Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, carried away. By the way, if you're wondering, Jeconiah, king of Judah, was carried to Babylon in 597 BC. Yeah, I'm sure that's right. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is, Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and edict was proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in custody of Haggai, Esther was taken into the king's palace and put in the custody of Haggai, who had charge of the woman. Oh wait, Esther is already referred to as a young woman in verse 7, so I guess I didn't need to include verse 8 as part of my reference verses. So this is where this genealogy that I wrote comes in. So you have Kish goes down, Shimei, Jair, Mordecai. So this lets us know that Mordecai is from this 3rd generation. I'm counting Kish as 0. Now I'm going to assume that Kish was about 0 years old when he was taken into Babylon in 597 BC, and that each generation is about 45 years. Since I think Mordecai was about 45, since he was old enough to be the adoptive father of a young adult woman. As you can see, verse 15, when the time came from Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his own daughter to go in this thing. So that's at 45, again 90, and let's go in for 135, and Mordecai's about 45, around that age when he's first introduced, so I'll just add 180. Thankfully this math is easy, so this 45 is a rather large generation time, so I think that makes sense. So let's go with about 4, 1. So assuming this rather large mid-large generation time, the events of chapter 2 verses 1 through 17 or 18 would have happened no later than 417 BC. Of course, you get earlier if you assume a smaller generation time. For example, if you assume a generation time of only 40 years, then you remove about 15 years in total, and this goes back to 432 BC. And I think this can be used to disqualify Artaxerxes II and III because they reigned too late, and Flavius Josephus says against Appian that, that the Tanakh the books were written over time from Moses' time to the death of Artaxerxes I. Now, I know several people, like Egyptologist Dr. David Fogg, have said that Josephus is not that reliable for events he's recording that are like very, very far past his own time, but this is less than in 500 years. So I think he's qualified. He would have been qualified to know if there were still books being written of the Tanakh written later than this time. So based on this, I'll half disqualify Darius II. So these three candidates I think are the most likely. Let me just assume a generation of 20 years. To see if I can. Let me see what happens if I assume a generation period of 25 years instead. So 75, 80, 120, that would be around 477 BC in the earliest. Let me test that with math. So I'm assuming a 20-year shorter generation time, So based on this criteria, I think we could also disqualify Darius the First as being too early, and even if I assumed a generation. And let's just subtract 20 years from the time period again if we assume that Kish was actually a 20-year-old adult and not a newborn baby when he was carried to Babylon. That would make 20, 45. Just about 85, about 497 BC, about 100 years only. So about 50 in total. Yeah. So I think Darius the First is too early. Definitely. Darius the Second might be too late. So I think these two who are the most likely, and this one is a bit meh. So now with my closing comments, I'll just pause this and then unpause it after I wrote down all my comments. So I'm done writing my notes. We're just going to review my conclusions. So for Cyrus II, I just wrote C notes because there are far too many problems for identifying the Ahasuerus of the Book of Esther with Cyrus II or Cyrus the Great. So he never ruled Egypt because Ahasuerus is said to have reigned from India to Ethiopia Ethiopia, meaning Kush, over 127 provinces. Kush is in Africa. The NIV notes say that is the Upper Nile region, which, as we all know, is in Egypt or Sudan, and which Cyrus the Great never ruled over. And he also ruled too early, and also some notes for when you want to start the clock. If you want to start it with his ascension in Persia, we didn't rule Media in his 3rd year, along with the next note if you want to start it as well if you want to start it with 550 BC with the Persian revolt, where Persia becomes independent of and conquers Media, establishing the Achaemanid Empire. We have no Jewish presence in Persia in the 6th year. That's also the case for here, for this note. And if you want to start the clock in 538 BC when he conquered Babylon, then the reign is too short. For Cambyses II, he reigned too short and too early, and also did not rule from India to Kush in his 3rd year. In fact, he conquers Egypt in his 5th year. Bardia ruled too short and early. Darius I ruled too early. Xerxes I is honestly one of the best is a good candidate. Artaxerxes I is another good candidate. In fact, both of these candidates have been identified by various people. Xerxes is identified by the NIV, and people have also identified him as Ahasuerus, using linguistic arguments based on his name. As you can see, this is what the footnote says: Hebrew Ahasuerus, a variant of Xerxes' Persian name. And Artaxerxes I, that's the one that the Septuagint uses. Xerxes II, he reigned too short, as did Sogdianus. And if you want to use Josephus's against Appian, you could also argue that they ruled too late. Darius II might have ruled too late, but that's only might have ruled too late based on going by Josephus. It's tentatively possible that Josephus was a bit off, so that's why it didn't completely disqualify Darius II. Now, Artaxerxes II definitely ruled too late and didn't rule from India to Kush, as he didn't rule Egypt. Artaxerxes III, he ruled too late, and also he did not have this expanse and from India to Kush, even by his 12th year, as he reconquered Egypt in his 15th year. So after Darius II dies, Egypt becomes independent, and it isn't actually reconquered into the Persian Empire in 343 BC. That is the 15th year of Artaxerxes III's reign. Artaxerxes IV and V, as well as Darius III, all reigned too short and late. So that is why I think the two best candidates are Xerxes I and Artaxerxes I. As you can see, here are the dates, here are the X's, here are the names, here are the notes, here are the specific notes about Cyrus the Great, here is my genealogy, and here are my reference verses.